text from our brother Jason. That was like little stuff. Jason's been visiting with us here for a while. He's on call at the mill today. They kind of had something go wrong out there, so he said, Lord willing, maybe it'll get solved and I can slip in for worship, but just wanted y'all to know where I am. So I don't know, little stuff like that, folks. It takes all of us. We're all here working on it together. All right, I know we kind of already did a prayer for them, but anything in particular else just to help Brother Oscar out later? Is there anything else we want to make mention or be prayed about in our worship hour? Yes, ma'am.
Madison, and it's doing well.
I saw Mark, his youngin and Tyler play on the same travel team, and so he was telling us about that. I guess he'd been in Madison to rehab something before, and he told him, said, send me to Madison. I like it over there. He said, well, Dad, if that's where you're comfortable, then that's where you'll go. But yeah, we'll certainly want to be mindful. That's right. It's just rough, man. Like I've told Marty and I told Judy, I don't have the words. I don't even know what to say other than we love you. We're praying for you. I told Marty, I said, we'll be, I don't even know what help to provide in scenarios like that, but whatever we can do, we'll try. So maybe while you're caring for them, I'll just go take care of your grass. If that'll take a load off your plate, then I can't do a lot, but I can cut some grass. You know what I mean? So there you go. I mean, you could probably build them some boards and like build them a back porch or something. I mean, I don't know how that would help anything, but just do something. All right. Anything else before we get rolling? I can, yes, sir. I'm gonna hire 3 goats from the Nolans, and I'm gonna drive a stop down with a rope on it and just let them, eat in circles, and I'll just move my stops. Be all right. Yeah. my dad may or may not have. There was kind of a joke about people being goat thieves and chicken thieves. That was kind of him and another guy from church always just used to mess with each other about. Yeah, I know them some kind of sorry people. They kind of come from a family of chicken thieves or goat thieves. And one time we actually were going through they'd be behind him in like McDonald's, or they'd be behind him at like the toll booth, and he'd pay for them and get the person to say, hey, is your family a bunch of chicken thieves or goat thieves? Little stuff like that. My dad may or may have not tied a goat in the dude's front yard one time when they got home, and put a sign out that said home with the chicken thieves, like they'd been out of town for a little while. So you never know what I may or may not have put a piglet in the slaughter's goat pen one time too. So you just never know you gotta be careful what you ask for, Mr. Oscar. There might be all kinds of stuff turned up in your yard down there. So, all right. Well, Miss Jan, yes. So she'd had a stroke before, and kind of minor-ish. She's been having a lot of headache pain, a lot of nausea, and so their local neurologist in their small town, I guess, is just not all that great. And so a lady that goes to church with them, that's a doctor, got her in immediately and got her an MRI scheduled 15 minutes after she left her office. So she had some pull, and they looked and said, yeah, confirmed you've had one. Well, they took it to the local neuro, and he said, oh, you haven't had a stroke. But 2 other doctors have said that she does. So Lord willing, tomorrow she'll get to go to a neuro in Houston and hopefully get more answers about that. So other than just like a lot of headache, a little bit of nausea like that, she's trying to figure it out, lower her stress. Probably if I was around, I'm sure she would just, because I'm a very calming.
Please don't go.
Yeah. Janet goes, please don't go visit your mother. Let her heal. Let her heal. I got you. All right. Anything else before we get rolling into, now that we're 15 minutes late? Y'all started 10 minutes late. I just want you to know that was y'all's fault. So, all right. I do want to talk about Haggai and Zerubbabel. I want to end kind of some of that because I kind of had planned to do that and Cyrus some stuff this morning, but if we do all that together, I'm fine with that. I want you to look at a couple timestamps before we dig into the text. All right. I need you to have a finger in Haggai and then a finger in Ezra as well, or if you've got a digital device and it's a little easier to, you can just beep, beep, beep. But a finger in Haggai and a finger in Ezra chapter 4 is where we're going to kind of be with some of that. But we're going to start in Haggai. So do y'all remember, by way of review, Zerubbabel is one of the kings that is in the genealogy of Jesus. What is Zerubbabel probably most famous for being a part of? What does he get to do, or what project does he lead? Rebuilding the temple. Anybody know what guy is responsible for rebuilding the walls later on? Nehemiah. So we kind of know about them, and they get a lot done in a short amount of time. A little bit of opposition, which we're going to cover a little bit today, with even the rebuilding of the temple. The book of Haggai, this is a timestamp. Chapter 1, verse 1. Where are we at in time? All right. And the second year of King Darius, or Darius, however you choose to say that. And you see there mentioned in verse 1, to Zerubbabel. And he's going to be one of the prophets that kind of helps lead the people and encourage the people along with Zerubbabel here. And just to peek at, not that it really wasn't the focus of the class this morning about what Haggai specifically, his book is about, but just to kind of give you a glimpse, verse 2. The people say it's not yet time to rebuild the Lord's house. Y'all know a little bit about, from previous knowledge, about the book of Haggai? He's got a little bit of there's a little bit of prodding that goes on in the book of Haggai. Now think about, where have they just come back from? What town or city? Babylon. They've been there, ballparkish, how many years? So they've been there a while. Now they've got home. Now you first get home. You first get released. Cyrus is the one that allowed them to come home. What's first order of business when you get home? Rebuilding what? And say, if you even have a house, you know what I mean? So you've got it, and there was some destruction. I mean, so first order of business when we get home is where am I going to lay my head tonight, right? Natural, understandable. But kind of the vibe you get from Haggai is the people say the time has not yet come to rebuild the Lord's house. And verse 4, is it time for you yourselves to be living in a paneled house while the Lord's house, remains in a ruin? And so there's a difference between a house and a paneled house. Why does paneled add to that? We're kind of beyond a temporary shelter. Now we're actually getting the sawmill out and making some panels, right? So, and that's kind of like, now we need to it's time to get the Lord's house in order. It's kind of what the book of Haggai is about, at least part of it in this first chapter. Verse 9, because of my house, which remains a ruin, while each of you is busy with your own house. And there was a result of that, verse 11, about drought on the fields and the new wine and the olive. They're not prospering. And the reason why is they're neglecting the Lord's house. And that's where I want you to see there's some room for, you got to get life, a place over your head. I understand that, but this ain't even the point of our book. But boy, there's some whittling for us, John Henry. Absolutely. I mean, and that's the point, is how big a focus is God in our life? There's some whittling for us in this. Is I got time for my stuff? Do I have time for the Lord's stuff? Amen. And it's actually, if you get the Lord's stuff right first, then your stuff gets, it's kind of funny how that works out. It's not wait till we have time, then we'll do it, or I'll save enough and then I'll do what the Lord needs me to do. And a lot of times, if you'll just give it to the Lord first, it's amazing how he opens doors to get done what needs to get done. So I just wanted you to see a little bit about that. And so in verse 12 of Haggai chapter 1, then Zerubbabel, along with Joshua, the high priest, and the whole remnant of the people obeyed. And so they kind of get started. Verse 14, the Lord stirs up the spirit of Zerubbabel and the spirit of the whole remnant of the people, and they start working on God's house. On the 24th day of the 6th month, this is still in that second year. In fact, chapter 2 of Haggai, timestamp, chapter 2, verse 1, you still have second year of, so they start building in the second year. Just by way of just a quick review, the issue in chapter 2 is, all right, we start back buildings. Anybody remember what their issue is around verse 3? Now think about it. You've been gone for 70 years. You think about David and Solomon have built this temple. What's the problem, John Henry? All right, that's part of it. And then, and there are some, though, that are old enough who do. And what's the problem? Man, and I mean, think about what David and, Solomon did it, and David did all that kind of, he knew he couldn't. So what did he do? He set his son up for success with the gathering and the building and the harvesting. And so Solomon could in all of its glory. And Solomon's temple, some of the descriptions we have, whatever. Well, now you're back. You're barely even in a house. And now you're building the Lord's house. And the old timers are seeing it. And they're like, I'm going to read a part from Ezra where there's some rejoicing and there's some weeping. And it's so loud you couldn't even tell the difference. I mean, so it's very mixed emotions. Yes.
Not just building material, but the tons of silver and gold.
Yes.
That were on the wall.
Overlaid part, absolutely. And so now all that's been robbed or destroyed or taken.
Going to reproduce that.
That's right. And so there's, all right, you need to get busy doing the Lord's. And now we get started. Well, it doesn't look as good as what we remember. And man, I've preached out of Haggai a pile of times when we do the same thing, right? So we got to get over chapter 1. It's time to get right for the Lord. And then we finally get started doing it, and it doesn't go as smoothly as we want, or it's not working out as polished, or maybe not everybody's as on board as you'd like for everybody to be, and you can get discouraged in a hurry. And Haggai's job here is man, keep going. Don't stop, and then God does bless them. Really what I wanted you to see was Zerubbabel. I wanted you to see the timestamp of the second year of Darius going on here. Now go to Ezra, and let's look at kind of it from Ezra's standpoint. They start building. We're kind of skipping chapter 3 where they rebuild the altar. And we also are where they celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. They get to do a lot of that. They start rebuilding the temple. They're bringing cedar logs that are authorized by Cyrus. The part I was going to tell you about, look at chapter 3, verse 12, just very quickly. They're laying the foundation. How does yours read? And just in your translation, Miss Yvonne, in verse 12.
What about the NIV? You have to do something else?
No, you can do NIV.
But many of the older priests and Levites and family heads who had seen the former temple wept aloud when they saw the foundation of this temple being laid, while many others shouted for joy.
Go ahead and read 13.
No one could distinguish the sound of the shouts of joy from the sound of weeping, because the people made so much noise and the sound was heard far away. I
mean, there's some serious mixed. I mean, we've been in captivity, and a lot of these people know why they're there. Remember some point, whether it's Ezra, which is kind of what I believe, Ezra is probably reading / preaching / partially writing 1st and 2nd Chronicles as they've come back. They're getting the message of 2nd Chronicles preached to them about, hey, you want to know why you were in Babylon? For you generations that were, the generation that was raised there, you want to know why you were born in Babylon rather than at home? And for you old timers to remind, they're getting all of that information. So now we get back and we didn't get started on the Lord's temple. And now we have got started on the Lord's temple and then it doesn't look as good. And here in Ezra, there's shouting of, wow, we're back and God let us be home and we're home. And there's a lot of, woo. But then there's a lot of remorse. Loud, it sounds like, that it could be heard from far away. Well, chapter 4, verse 1, just kind of peeking at verse 1, what's going to be an issue? What word do you see? You got adversary. What else you got? Enemies. Opposition. When the adversaries of Judah, or the enemies of Judah and Benjamin, heard the exiles were building a temple for the Lord, the God of Israel, they came to Zerubbabel and the heads of the families. Let us help you build, because like you, we seek your God and have been sacrificing to him since the time of, good luck with his name, Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us here. They want to help, and they kindly say, no thanks. Now, there's a whole lot of Bible history I really didn't plan on getting into that we can get into, but we can read parts from Kings and others where this is where, when they came in and the Syrians kind of conquered the north, They got everybody out of there. And then one of the stories we read about is that God sends lions amongst the people, and they start gnawing on them because they're not worshiping God the right way. What has happened is they'd go and they'd conquer, and they'd get everybody, they'd get the royalty that would be taken out of there and various people, and they'd kind of left like the sickly and the various poor people. And so they force populated the area. So they don't want to leave a stronghold of one nation because you can rebel. So we're going to take people we robbed from over here and we'll put them there. And that's where the Samaritans come from. Is you've got mixed races, mixed people, foreigners and Jews all mixed in here together. And where the lions come into play is, and it's a spectacular reading of, they're kind of doing a little bit for God, but they're kind of doing a little bit for other false gods. And God's like, no, and so the lions get sent in amongst them. And then it's like, hey, we need to find one of the local old timers and find out what we're doing wrong here. And so they go and they kind of learn more about Jehovah. But then by the time you get to the end of that chapter, they do a little bit for God and they do a little bit for so it's just a mess. That's what you have. So if you want to know why they would say no thanks to help, well, it's because let me ask you that question. So you got people that are messing around maybe with worshiping the right God, but still worshiping the wrong gods. Where are they just getting back from, and why did they go there? Do you see the problem? Where did they just get back from? Why did they go there? Huh? They fell away from God. They were themselves doing a little bit for the right God. And so when people are, it's kind of like almost like Trump PTSD or Trump, like, look, we've already been down that road, and I don't, we're doing the best we can to fly straight this time because we don't want to get carted off again. So thanks, but no thanks is what they say to these people. Well, that obviously doesn't make them all that happy. They say in verse 3, you have no part with us in building this temple to God. We alone will build it for the Lord, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, commanded us. So verse 4, then the peoples around them set out to discourage the people of Judah and make them afraid to go on building. They're going to do more than that. Verse 5, they bribed officials to work against them and frustrate their plans for how long? Entire reign of Cyrus and down to the reign of Darius, king of Persia. Remember, like when we're reading in Haggai, it's the second year of Darius. Well, we've already had all of Cyrus first. So how long were they frustrating them? The whole time. And again, if I could insert here, it doesn't stop you. Do y'all remember anything about, like, we usually know more about Nehemiah than we do Ezra for whatever reason? Y'all remember like one of the scenes of them rebuilding the walls? There's just something about their hands. Y'all remember that part? What? Yeah, and why are they? So they got a sword in one hand and they're laying bricks with the other. Why are they having to do that? I mean, the enemies have gathered on there, so that doesn't stop. Well, does it surprise you that it's going on when they're building the temple too? The surrounding people don't, and so what they do, and man, we're not going to take the time to read all this, but starting in about verse 6. Does your Bible, like, do you kind of get like a different font or an offset or a typeset to kind of show you that this is a letter that they sent? Maybe not in 6 and 7, but starting maybe around verse 9-ish, you get some names of people that I'm not even going to try. Verse 11 says this is a copy of the letter they sent to him. So they send off a letter to King Artaxerxes in verse 11. Verse 12, the king should know that the people who came up to us from you have gone to Jerusalem and are rebuilding that rebellious and wicked city. They're restoring the walls and repairing the foundations. How dare they, right? Furthermore, verse 13, the king should know that if this city is built and its walls are restored, no more taxes or tribute or duty will be paid, and eventually the royal revenues will suffer. What are they selling? As Billy Wallace said, propagating. I mean, it's no, like when they're trying to sell Jesus down the river, when they're trying to sell Paul, it's just like when you get your false, well, if you let this happen, man, it's just nonsense. Verse 14, now since we are under obligation to the palace, it is not proper for us to see the king dishonored in such a way, right? Nonsense. In verse 15, in our records, you will find that this city is a rebellious city, troublesome to kings and provinces, a place with a long history of sedition. This is why this wicked city was destroyed. And so the king sends a reply in verse 17. And basically in verse 19, I've issued an order, a search was made, and it's found this city does have that long history. Verse 20, Jerusalem has had powerful kings ruling. And so verse 21, now issue an order to these men to stop work so that this city will not be rebuilt until I so order. And so 23, as soon as a copy of the letter was read, they went immediately to the Jews in Jerusalem and compelled them by force to stop. And then what do you have in verse 24 of Ezra 4? What do you got, Bill? 24 of Ezra 4.
Take heed now that you do not fail to do this. Why should damaging
Is that 4? Is that 4, 24?
Ezra 4,
24.
24. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm up a verse or two. Thus the work of the house of God, which is at Jerusalem, ceased, and it was discontinued until the second year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia.
So kind of see now our time stamp. So they kind of got started and got shut down. The enemies told them, no, you can't. Now what are we going to do? Well, look at chapter 5, verse 1. Who enters the scene? Haggai, the guy that we just read, a little bit of the book. What was his first message in chapter 1? What was the issue? Y'all's house isn't God's house. Haggai 1, what was the issue? It's time. And I wonder, just by putting these two together, you know, the enemy has said, stop. Man, government has said, don't build God's house. And I just wonder if you put this kind of together, that's the second year of Darius. Well, Haggai, what was our time stamp? What year was it? And he says, what time is it? It's time to build. And it's not in Haggai, but when you can compare it to this, it's almost like, I don't care what man says. It's time to do what God says. And so Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the prophet, which we didn't read about, but we could, prophesied to the Jews in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel who was over them. And so Zerubbabel, verse 2, set to work to rebuild the house of God in Jerusalem, and the prophets of God who were with them supporting them. Kind of get the picture here? When you put Ezra and Haggai together, maybe they did get started and they got told, stop, by these enemies, by this bribing, by this opposition. And God, through his prophet, said, what? Build. Now, the question they asked, verse 3. Carol, you want to read your version of verse 3? I'm sorry for the names. Just fake them until you make them.
At the same time, Tatnai, the governor of the region beyond the river of Shethar-Boznai, and their companions came to them and spoke thus to them. Who has commanded you to build this temple and finish this wall?
All right, who's commanded you to rebuild this temple and finish? Anybody else have anything different than commanded?
Authorized.
I don't know why, but that word just. So put it all together, whether you got who authorized you to do this, who commanded, what are they saying? Who do you think you are? Because we remember, like we just read in chapter 3, they've been bribing they've been bribing and getting people to stop the work and frustrate the work, and now through Haggai they're encouraged to start, and it's like, well, just who do you guys think you are? They also asked, verse 4, what are the names of those who are constructing this temple? How does that add to it? It just reminds me, like when you see people like not treating police officers right. What's your name and badge? No. Who do you think you are? What's your name? Nonsense. All right. Well, look at verse 5. Chandler, you want to read your version of verse 5? 5:5, Ezra 5:5.
But the eye of their pride was on the elders of the Jews, and they did not stop until the report could come to Darius, and a written reply be returned concerning it.
All right, so kind of how does that, what do they do then? I mean, they're kind of saying, who gave you permission to do this? Y'all better stop. And they say, well, we're going to keep working until we get someone's going to have to tell us to stop. You're going to have to tell us to stop. And so the copy of the letter, verse 6, that they send to King Darius now, or Darius, I've never known how because I've heard it both ways. Like I said, maybe I'm reading too much in this, but do y'all have verse 7? The report they sent to him read as follows. To King Darius. What do you have right after that? Huh? All peace. The NIV says cordial greetings. You know, I can get it. When you write letters, the putting on airs in these letters, just whatever. All right. The king should know that we went to the district of Judah and to the temple of the great God, and the people are building it with big rocks, you know, large stones. They're not just building this. They're hauling in the heavy equipment in here and timbers, and work is being carried. And verse 9, we questioned the elders and said, who authorized you to rebuild this temple and finish it? We also asked their names so they could be written down, names of the leaders for your information. Now, I want us to read together 11 through 14. 11 through 14. Mark, you want to read that? This is, just so you know, this is the answer they gave. So I do actually applaud that they include what Zechariah and Zerubbabel and Haggai's answer was. 11 through 14, Mark.
And thus they returned to us an answer saying, we are the servants of the God of heaven and earth, and we are rebuilding the temple that was built many years ago, which a great king of Israel built and completed. But because our fathers provoked the God of heaven to wrath, he gave them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed this temple and carried the people away to Babylon. However, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Babylon, King Cyrus issued a decree to build this house of God. Also, the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple that was in Jerusalem and carried into the temple of Babylon. Those King Cyrus took from the temple of Babylon, and they were given to one named Sheshbazzar, whom he had made governor.
And basically he said, you take this stuff back. But so their response is, if you were to put some of that in your own words, what's their response? All right, King Cyrus gave us permission, and but even before that, I kind of like some of their history, right?
We were rebuked by God.
Yes.
For kindling his wrath against us, and that's why we were carried away.
And and maybe I'm reading into it, but it's almost like you asked the question, who authorized building this? Well, you just need to know, buddy. God authorized the building of this temple. That's the one who originally had it built. And I'm giving you reasons of why that same God allowed it to be torn down. And by that same God's authority, I'm rebuilding it now. And oh, by the way, in case you need that, you may not know who he is. Cyrus said we could. You know what I mean? Like, who authorized this? You know, kind of like when Jesus gets questioned, by what authority are you doing these things? And then they're like, well, if we say by this, or, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, I have authority to do what I'm going to do here. If you just kind of scan down, it's not yet finished. The end of verse 16 says, basically he says, you go search and see if this is true. And so starting in chapter 6, King Darius issues an order that they find in the archives stored in the treasury at Babylon, and they find a scroll. And here's what it is. You have like memorandum or something like that above verse 3. In the first year of King Darius, the king issued a decree concerning the temple of God in Jerusalem. Let the temple be rebuilt. Look, if you would, about the middle of verse 4. The costs are to be paid by the royal treasury. Also, the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took, are supposed to be what? Verse 5. Return to their places. Verse 7, well, how does it read? That's what yours said? I kind of like, this one says, don't interfere with the work of the temple of God. But I said, let this household, I just kind of, don't mess with this. Let the governor of the Jews and the Jewish elders rebuild this house of God on its site, verse 7. Moreover, verse 8, I hereby decree what you are to do for these elders. You kind of have the middle of their expenses are to be fully paid. Again, where? From the king or out of the royal treasury, Bill?
And these decrees were written on copper cylinders. And we found one
That's right.
that says this.
That's
And
right.
I don't think it's about Jerusalem, but he did it for all the little temples.
We've got, it's a Cyrus, what do they call it? Cyrus's cylinder, where we have kind of one of these decrees. We found some of
It
this stuff.
says exactly word for word what these say.
It's kind of cool. Kind of like God putting his, like, in case you think that, I love it. And I like I say, a lot of your Bible translations kind of offset the type here where you can kind of tell this is a copy of the letter. This is God, by the Holy Spirit, made sure that like we have copies of this letter. Money is given, verse 9, not just money, but animals, bulls and rams and lambs for offerings to the God of heaven. Kind of the end of verse 9 says, must be given to them daily without fail. You have something along that lines? So that they, verse 10, may offer sacrifices pleasing to the God of heaven. Verse 11, furthermore, now this is good. Furthermore, I decree that if anyone defies this edict, how does yours read, Mr. Bill Hartsfield?
Furthermore, I decree that if anyone defies this edict, a beam is to be pulled from their house, and they are to be impaled on it.
So, yeah, hey, you people that were bribing and thwarting, that they find the document that Cyrus read. I'm providing them money from the king's treasury. I'm offering them animals. And if anybody messes with this work, take a beam from their house. In other words, we're pulling their house down and hang them on it.
Their house is to be made a pile of rubble.
Woo! Verse 12, may God, who caused his name to dwell there, overthrow any king or people who lifts a hand to change this decree or to destroy this temple in Jerusalem. I, Darius, have decreed it. Let it be carried out with diligence. Is that good reading? This, and what ought to grab, this is Darius the Mede giving honor to the God of heaven. And I think he's motivated by Cyrus, who, and I have some stuff written. I'm going to read some stuff from Josephus, and maybe if I remember, I'll put it on the screen, where Josephus, who's like a Jewish historian, writes and records that basically a lot of the reason why Cyrus was moved to do what he did is that local Jews brought him copies of the book of Isaiah, the scrolls of Isaiah, where he was called out by name and called, do you remember some of the titles? Y'all, my anointed one, my servant, and like, can you imagine, like, it's over 100 years old, and like, I decreed that Bill Blue would let my people, you know what I mean? And a lot of that, Josephus records that that's part of what moved Cyrus to do what he did. And he even says, the God who called my name.
But why would Jews be allowed to even come to him with that? Esther.
That's right. And we're going to follow up on that. Maybe next time.
I believe verse 10, he even says, pray for me. Basically.
And pray for the well-being of, pray for the well-being of the king and his son. Ooh, that's good.
He sees the importance of all of this. I mean, has he been given direct revelation from God? You see what I'm saying?
It's saying, well, are these prophets, is he allowing these prophets to speak? That's where you don't. I get the picture that Cyrus and Darius are obviously not in Jerusalem. Letters are being sent back and forth. But here's what I kind of am perplexed by, though. They sent their initial letter to Darius, and then he says, well, let me go look. And then he finds he finds his own decree, and he finds Cyrus's decree. Maybe I'm reading that wrong. Maybe this is his new decree that basically we're going to leave these. I don't know. We're past time, but like, is this good reading? You see God's hand in helping them get his house back in order, and then sending the prophets, at the right time to I don't care what the opposition says. Have faith, have confidence.
Zerubbabel's in both genealogies.
That's right. Both Mary and Joseph's. All right, we'll stop there. We may continue that just kind of to the end before we jump into Cyrus, but there's some good stuff in there. But, tear their house down, take a beam from it, and hang it on if they're going to get in the way. Yay! What you doing there? You have a palm? Ooh, do you know what that palm was all about?
On Monday.
Yeah, do you know what day that was?